All right, good evening. I'll get us going. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted on the www.albemarle.org website calendar when available. I am Charles Rapp, the Deputy Director of Community Development, filling in this evening as we handle organizational business. So I'll call the meeting to order and establish a quorum if would you please call the roll, Carolyn?
Yes. Mr. Bailey?
Present.
Mr. Carazana?
Present.
Ms. Firehawk?
Present.
Mr. Missile?
Present.
Mr. Bivens?
Present.
Mr. Claiborne?
Present.
And Ms. Moore is out sick tonight.
All right, so we do have a quorum. Are there any matters not from the public not listed on tonight's agenda for public input, including the consent agenda?
No, sir, not at this time.
All right, well, my time is almost up here. Our first item for this evening is our election of officers. I will ask the commission if there are any nominations for chair.
I'd like to bring forth a nomination if I might. And if so, if it's given that this is the appropriate time, I would like to nominate our colleague Karen Firehawk as the next chair of the Albemarle County Planning Commission.
All right, so Commissioner Bivens has nominated Commissioner Firehawk for the chair. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
I would be honored to serve.
Well, that's probably a good thing to know up front. You can nominate at the end and say, oh no, you were talking about somebody else, right? That wasn't me.
All right. Would the clerk please call for a vote?
Mr. Rabb, before the roll is called, there needs to be a motion to elect Ms. Firehawk as the chair, if that's the close of the nominations.
Yes, I nominate. That was my nomination, Counselor.
So Mr. Bivens, are you then moving that Ms. Firehawk?
I moved.
Yes.
And it was seconded by someone.
All right.
It was seconded by Corey.
Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Mr. Carazana?
Aye.
Mr. Missile?
Aye.
Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne?
Aye.
And Ms. Firehawk?
Aye.
All right, congratulations, Chair Firehawk. I will pass the meeting over to you to proceed with our vice chair nominations.
Yes, do we have it? I would, if it's appropriate, I would actually like to nominate Corey Claiborne as vice chair.
I think our counselor wants to say something.
He's looking at his rules.
No, I'm just waiting for a second, if there is a second.
Okay.
I second. I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Right.
Honored to do it. We have a lot of great mentors I'm looking at on the screen, so I know they'll keep me straight. So thank you.
Thank you for being willing to do that. I move that Corey Claiborne serve as vice chair of the Albemarle County Planning Commission.
Second.
We call the vote, please.
All right. Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Mr. Carazana?
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk?
Aye.
Mr. Missile?
Aye.
Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Our next item on the agenda for this evening is the discussion of the Planning Commission Rules of Procedure, which we all received in advance. I don't know, Secretary Rapp, if we need to actually go through those. I don't believe that there's been any changes since last year, but that is the matter before us. If anyone has any comments, and I see Andy is raising his hand. Mr. Herrick.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, is the commission going to appoint a secretary? I see that was an item of business. Number 3.
I'm sorry to move past that. Do we have a nomination for secretary of the commission?
Yes, I would move the alum from Georgia to keep him humble, to allow him to remain his humble self.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we'll call the question. Any discussion? All right, if there being none, we'll call the question despite the secretary's mishap with his Georgia tie.
All right. Mr. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you. Charles Rapp is once again the secretary of the commission, and I apologize for not seeing that. I think I was thwarted by the if needed after the appointment of secretary, so I wasn't clear that we need to actually reappoint him. So with that, we'll go back to the item I was trying to bring up, which was discussion of Planning Commission rules of procedure. We adopt these every year at the beginning of the year. I'm not aware that there's been any significant changes to them since last year, but is there any necessary staff report on this item?
Madam Chair, not as far as I'm concerned. These are as you indicated, these are the same rules that we previously drafted and reused from year to year. I've not received any requests for any amendments since last year, and so the rules that are before the commission at this point are the same as were adopted last year.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt these rules as presented?
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Claiborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Bailey. Is there any discussion on the rules? Hearing no comments, would you please call the question, Carolyn?
Yes. Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bailey.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so moved. The next item on our agenda is the discussion of committee boards and bodies to which committee members serve as liaisons. And we have been sent the list of everyone who, all the different positions. And for our newer member, this certainly is up for negotiation. Sometimes there's a little trading, sometimes people want all the good juicy ones, but you have to give one up for your friend. So in any case, would it be helpful to have that list put up on the screen?
Yes.
I can do that.
Just to remind everyone what all these different committees are and which ones have openings. And we can, and if there's any questions about any of them, such as when they meet or how much time is involved, that's also certainly fair. So Charles is getting ready to share that so we can all have that before us.
Is that up?
Yes.
All right, let me make it a little bigger for us. So we have a vacancy with the 5th Street and Avon Street Community Advisory Committee, with the Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee, the MPO Technical Committee, and the Havana River Corridor Steering Committee. I will say that plan is in its final stages. I believe it's going before the City Planning Commission and City Council over the next, I believe, 1 to 2 months, and it will be going for the Board of Supervisors, as y'all saw maybe a month or so ago, for endorsement as well here. So I'm not expecting many more meetings on that in the near future. And then we also have a vacancy with the Village of Havana Community Advisory Committee.
So to simplify this a little bit, for the CACs, the community advisory committees, those are filled by the commissioners who serve those districts. So there's not really any horse trading to be done there. It's simply whoever is the person. So obviously, I think the 5th and Avon Street was listed as vacant because we didn't have a commissioner at the time to put there. But now it's Fred.
I think that's me.
Yes.
As the new guy on the block, I will gladly take that position, as I will with the Village of Havana as well.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. So that takes care of those two. And by the way, we can trade different positions on different other ones as well. But we might as well talk about the MPO Tech, because that is also listed as vacant. I think that Tim Keller had served in that position, and so his absence makes that an opening. Julian.
I served in that on that for a number of years, and it would be interesting to see how that changes, given that they've got a new change of leadership, and given the number of sort of specific and local transportation matters that are coming up, and it tends to be, just as this is not saying, but it tends to be in a different kind of path than the citizens in the CTAC. And so this is the one that sort of sees proposals before it actually comes to the Board of Supervisors or to the MPO, which is, the Metropolitan Planning or Committee, the MPO for a region. So it's actually, there's really good work there. And if somebody is not afraid of details, because there are some, that's actually an interesting thing to see what's happening with transportation in our community. I will just say that. And I mean,
yeah, could you also fill in a little bit about how often they meet and what times? Because I know some commissioners have day jobs that could interfere with that.
I think it tended to meet at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I believe it may have met once a month, once every other month. But it met at 10, and it was usually from 10 to 12. And the wonderful thing about the unfortunate thing, but the wonderful thing about today, where we're meeting now, it's via Zoom, so you don't have to displace down to Water Street, which is when we meet. When they met in person, it was in the TJPD, or the Thomas Jefferson Planning District offices on Water Street.
Do you recall what day of the week they meet?
I don't. I don't, but give me a second and I can perhaps look on a calendar and find that out for you. But I don't. I want to say, I shouldn't do that. Let me look. I shouldn't say that. Let me actually look and see when they actually meet.
Thanks. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I think
no, it's not a problem.
Be helpful.
Yeah, not a problem. I will, while I'm looking at that, I will say I don't know what the long-range school planning liaison role is, because I don't think I've ever had that before. I can sort of suppose what that is, but I don't know what that is. So somebody has to help me out on that one. Okay. If anyone knows, that would be really helpful.
I don't believe that anyone who's on this meeting this evening has served in that role. I know that in past, Bruce Dotson had been a commissioner who served in that role, and it was, they look at demands for schools in terms of how many students there will be and different age cohorts, what structures they'll need, what kinds of facilities they'll need. It's sort of just what it sounds like, long-range planning, but it also is a very helpful position for the Planning Commission, because obviously we are engaged in long-range planning, especially with the comprehensive plan coming up. And so understanding what our school demands are has a direct impact on where and how we are able to grow and sustainably house and teach our children. So it is for people who also like to dig into the details, because I know they do get into a lot of projections and stats and figures, but that person then comes back and reports to the Planning Commission on what they're learning and what some of those items are that affect what we're doing with our development plans or comprehensive plan stuff. So that's a very short and quick summary.
That's helpful. I'll share something that I've been put on after that. So it tends to meet on Tuesdays. The NPO Tech tends to meet on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. And it looks like it meets once a month.
Okay.
So, I could take that one if it's available, and I'll have to look at schedules, obviously, but probably free up. So it's once a month, Tuesdays at 10. Oh,
It's once a month.
It all went dark over here.
Oh, you okay? You didn't lose power.
I
guess I wasn't moving enough.
It looks like they meet on the third Tuesday of alternating months at 10 a.m.
There you go.
So
every other month.
6 meetings a year. Yeah, starting in January. January 18th, their first scheduled meeting.
And our counselors just put the calendar in our chat for those who need to see it, for Luis if you need to see it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so let me give, if I might, Chair, give you a little. So I've been asked to join the Lambs Lane Campus Master Planning, which I think is a short-term thing. It's just to look at what's happening, and it's not connected to the Planning Commission necessarily, but it's asking for some community members to look at some alternate ways of that the Albemarle, what's basically known as the Lambs Lake campus, which is Albemarle, Jack Jewett, Greer, and then there's another school. Eventually, the Boys and Girls Club is in the process of building a facility on this campus, and perhaps looking at what's the best optimal use of this land, whether or not there should be some consideration of land that's up north of us. So that's been proffered on the what is it, Berkmar bypass or Berkmar, whatever road that is up there. And so I've been asked to do that. So there is a nexus between that, but they're unrelated, if that's helpful, Chair.
Okay, and you were speaking in that in relation to the Long Range Planning Committee.
Correct.
For the schools. Okay.
Correct.
So Luis has offered to serve as the MPO tech. So let's just close that out first. Does anyone want to request to have that position? Is everyone fine with him taking on that role? Thumbs up. I don't think we have to vote. Okay, that's great. Congratulations, Luis. You have the transportation planning, a really, really important role for the Planning Commission. So I appreciate that. Now on to
Just in terms of connecting with the right folks, is there someone that I can get with, or?
Yeah, well, we'll coordinate with you, Luis. No problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Charles will help with letting the committees know that they've been has been appointed, and then with you with the scheduling and that. So, if you want to speak more with Julian about his experience on it, that's certainly a wonderful idea as well. So, with that,
Julian and I are due for a lunch.
Yes, outside 6 feet apart. Okay, so now back to the long range planning and the schools. So Julian, you were mentioning that you were already involved in some efforts to think strategically about different schools. So are you saying you would like to serve on that committee?
Unless somebody else wants to do that to round out unless someone else wants to do that to round out the portfolio, I would do it. So if someone has I know some of our colleagues have wanted to chew on school issues for a while, and if they want to do that, I appreciate that. But I just offer that so people know that there's this other thing going on.
Sure. Is there anyone else who's interested in serving on the long range planning committee for the schools?
I saw a head nod no over there.
Okay. Yes, I mean, we're all interested. Let's put that we're all interested in schools, but you are willing to serve and no one is asking to take that away. So, all right, with that. So now that takes care of the vacancies, I believe, that were on our list, but there are other positions. Yes, go ahead.
The Agricultural and Forestal District Advisory Committee, I don't believe we did that chair yet.
Okay, I mean, I'm not closing out the discussion of committees because there's other committees that people might be interested in serving on. And Mr. Missile, for your information, usually each one of us has one or two committees that we do in addition to our chair role. So there's the CAC, that's one, and then usually one other. So if there is something that on this list that strikes you as of particular interest to you, because some of us aren't serving on more than one, I would love to hear that. As our past chair, Mr. Bivens, just mentioned, the Ag Forestal District Committee also has an opening. And that, I guess, does that meet in the evenings? And if so, same question, do we know when they meet or how often? Next year, we'll put this all on a chart with all this information.
Yeah, we probably ought to put that on there. I believe theirs has been more of a as needed lately.
When they have new nominations for the district.
Yep, when they
so it's only what, maybe a handful of times a year.
Correct. And we just handled several of them, so I don't believe they'll be coming anytime soon.
Okay. Is anyone particularly interested in taking that one on?
I'd be happy to take that one on.
Okay, wonderful.
Sure. And just as a side note, I'm also on the Land Use and Environmental Planning Committee as a UVA Foundation employee. So I know, Julian, you have that as well. I'm there automatically as a member through the foundation. So I don't know if it's helpful for me to also serve as a planning commissioner. I'm not sure if I could serve both roles, but I'm there anyway. Yeah. So
I sort of got on that because most of the land that they're talking about when it's around, you look at the three jurisdictions, some of that's about the what I will say is the urban, what they like to refer to as the urban core. I'm trying to figure out a new language for that because it's neither urban nor core, but that's, I'll fight that battle slowly over the next few years. And most of that sits in our district, sits in the Jack Jewett district, and the overlaps with UVA particularly sits in the Jack Jewett district. So that's why I've been sitting on that. But if somebody else wishes to, I'm okay. But you're going to deal with a lot of issues that are about the sort of the close-in properties.
Yeah, and I wasn't offering to take that position. I just wanted everyone to realize that I'm also involved in that process.
Mm-hmm.
Understood. Okay. All right, so we will have Mr. Missile on the Ag Forestal District since no one is contesting that or begging to take that on. Are there any other positions that are currently filled by one of us that somebody else one of you other commissioners would like to take a stab at? And I know that Commissioner Moore's not here this evening because she's out. So she, I know, is on the Historic Committee. But I just wanted to put that out there. I know Jenny and I have traded back and forth in the past between the ACE Committee and the Historic Resources Committee. But any other committees that strikes anyone's fancy that they would like to take on? I mean, if not, we can close this discussion, but I just wanted to ask because just because someone's serving doesn't mean that you can't have a shot at during that role. Just give you a sec. There's no hue and cry for taking another committee on. We can leave it as it is. All right, so I'm not seeing any sad faces. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda. Just a second, just navigating one tiny laptop screen here this evening. Okay, so the next item is to review and adopt the meeting schedule proposed for 2022. That also has been sent out in advance. I'm sure that there will be one or two meetings here and there that a commissioner cannot attend. We don't really need to know that right now unless later on we find out that there are, all of us cannot attend a certain night. We don't have quorum. But in general, is everyone okay with the meeting schedule as proposed? And the time? Yep.
Yes.
All right. To our council, do we have to vote to adopt that schedule?
Yes, there should be a motion and a vote to adopt the meeting schedule.
Wonderful. Would someone like to make such a motion?
Also move.
Was that you, Fred? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm moving my screens around. Mr. Bibbins, are you seconding with your peace sign there?
I am. That's the second piece.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, Carolyn, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Bibbins,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
He had to
He put
step
in the
away for a
chat.
moment.
okay,
Aye, I'm back.
Okay.
Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey,
Aye.
thank you.
All right. The motion carries to adopt our schedule. All right, the next item was the consent agenda, which is on the next page. That the only items on there are the approval of the minutes for December 7th and December 14th. I did actually have a question. I had sent comments back on my job was to review the minutes of the 7th. And I sent that back last week as soon as I had power back. And my comment was that I believe that the motion on page 10 was also to include street trees as part of the planting strip. And so I thought I would use this. I sent this comment back to staff, but I thought I would check in with Mr. Rapp if that is his recollection as well. If so, it needs to be added to the minutes. Or perhaps further research so we can adopt the minutes at a later time.
I did make that change that you said to me, and that's what was said when I listened to the recording.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the only change that I had. So unless that is not in comporting with what Mr. Rapp remembers, I think we're okay with that. Does anyone have any comments on that change?
So just to clarify, so if there were a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted, perhaps Carolyn could clarify whether that would include the amended minutes. Just to clarify that that's what would be involved if a motion to adopt the consent agenda were made.
That is correct. They are the amended minutes with the changes that I received.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda then?
I motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Corey a second, Corey Claiborne a second. Any discussion? All right, Carolyn, would you call the question?
Yes. Mr. Claiborne? Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Missile?
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. Firehawk?
Aye.
Mr. Carazana?
Aye.
Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion carries. We can now move on to our two items that we have for public hearing this evening. The first item is, I have to increase my screen resolution, ZMA 202000013 Overlook Hotel, Pantops PDMC amendment. May we have the staff report?
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me and see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. My name is Andy Rettelbach, and I'm a senior planner here with the Albemarle County Planning Division. And tonight I'm presenting to you a staff report on two separate applications that are interrelated, however. And these two applications are ZMA 2020-13, the Overlook Hotel Pantops PDMC Amendment, and SP 2021-10, the Auto Superstore SP Amendment. So to provide some context on where these applications are, it is in the Pantops area. I've circled the location where the first application is proposed. And I should say this aerial view is looking from the north, so the top of the screen is the south. You can see the edge of the Havana Ridge Shopping Center up in the top left. The Carriage Hill condos and apartments are in the top right. And then Route 250 goes across the screen in the bottom left. And so the green area in the center is the site of the proposed CMA, and the SP, which also involves the auto dealership there to the right. So to provide some more information on these two applications, there are two separate applications. However, they are interrelated. The zoning map amendment is a request on tax map parcel 78-73A7, which I've labeled, and you can see in the photo on the right. And then there is a related special use permit request, which is for tax map parcel 78-13, which I've also labeled. So you can see how the parcels are adjacent to one another. So the zoning map amendment application is a request to amend the application plan approved with ZMA 2002-8 to allow a hotel as a permitted use on this parcel and to remove a tree conservation area that was designated on the application plan approved back in 2002. And then the special use permit is a request to amend the previously approved special use permit SP 2002-13 to remove conditions and language in it that requires an offsite landscaping easement. And so even though the special use permit applies to tax map parcel 78-13, that offsite landscaping easement is in fact on tax map parcel 78-73A7, which is, of course, the parcel proposed to be rezoned to allow the hotel. So that's kind of a summary of how these two applications are connected and why they are coming before you together in both one presentation and as one staff report. So the zoning of these parcels, they are different of different zoning districts. 73A7, which is the subject of the ZMA where the hotel is proposed, is currently zoned PDMC, Planned Development Mixed Commercial, which is a planned development zoning district that allows flexible uses, mainly commercial uses. And that PDMC that includes several different parcels to the east and southeast, including the Havana Ridge Shopping Center. And the subject parcel is really the outermost parcel of this PDMC and is the last undeveloped parcel that's located in it. And then the special use permit application that relates to 7813, that parcel is zoned HC or highway commercial. The overlay districts, these parcels are both within the entrance corridor, and there are managed steep slopes on both parcels as well. And there is a small area of preserved steep slopes on 78-13. However, it is on the kind of west and southwest side of that parcel, and it's not relevant to their request to remove the landscape easement requirement condition. Looking at the Pantops master plan, both of these parcels are largely designated as community mixed use in that plan. That is the brown color that you can see. It of course, recommends a wide variety of uses: commercial, retail, residential, office. Hotels is a specifically designated primary use, institutional uses, And then several secondary uses as well, like light industrial, existing auto commercial sales and service, office R&D, that sort of thing. The building height that is recommended for this land use designation is 2 to 4 stories. And then the rear of both of those parcels to the opposite side of the parcels from Route 250, where those parcels are adjacent to the Carriage Hill residential community, there are areas designated as parks and green systems of those 2 parcels. So the specifics of the proposals, the first slide is related to the ZMA. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it is a parcel that is part of a larger PDMC district that includes the Ravenna Ridge Shopping Center and out parcels. The applicant is requesting to amend the application plan to allow a hotel on this parcel, which is not currently a permitted use under the current application plan. And then, as I mentioned in the slide previously, hotel is a primary recommended use in the community mixed use land designation in the Pantops master plan. The applicant is also requesting to remove a tree conservation area located on this parcel. This was approved with the previous rezoning on the application plan for screening purposes, but it is currently largely devoid of trees. This development would be subject to ARB approval. The applicant is requesting that an entrance be allowed directly onto Route 250, as there are no available street stub outs to connect to, including from the other PDMC zone parcels that it is adjacent to. And the entrance would be subject to Vdot approval at the site planning stage. As I mentioned, there are a lot of managed steep slopes on this property, and so managed steep slopes are permitted to be disturbed by the zoning ordinance. However, any disturbance, grading, retaining walls, that sort of thing, would be subject to the regulations found in the zoning ordinance for that overlay district. That would be reviewed at the site planning stage and must be approved by the county engineering division. And then there is no development in the rear of the parcel, that portion that is designated as parks and green systems. And it is important to note that this part of the parcel is actually the location of a proposed future roadway that is identified in the Pantops master plan, where Rolkin Road would continue from its intersection at Hanson Road, continuing on to the northwest. And so this is just a sheet from the applicant's application plan that they provided, showing the layout of the proposal. The proposed hotel building is there in the center. The yellow shading there in the middle is the tree conservation area that is proposed to be removed. There is a landscaping easement up in the top right that is a green rectangle that is proposed to remain, and any the site plan, if this CMA is approved, would be required to ensure that the conditions of that easement continue to be maintained. And then the portion of the landscape easement that is proposed to be removed and that is subject to the special use permit can be seen in kind of the light orange color on the left side of the screen, the like southwest portion of this parcel adjacent to TMP 7813. So to provide just some more information on the special use permit request, it is the location of an existing auto dealership that is proposed to remain. The original SP from 2002, which permitted the outdoor storage and display use for that dealership, had conditions and language in it requiring an offsite landscaping easement to screen that use of the outdoor storage and display. And so this easement is on the rear of the adjacent parcel 7873A7, which the applicant is now proposing to put the hotel on in the center and front portions of that parcel. And so this is just a sheet from the conceptual plan that was provided by the applicant showing the easement that is proposed to be removed there in the rear of 78-73A7 to allow for the hotel to be constructed on that parcel. So in staff's review of these two applications, there were several factors favorable. They are consistent with the uses recommended by the Pantops master plan in the community mixed use land use designation. The requests are consistent or mostly consistent with the applicable neighborhood model principles. And no development is proposed for the rear of the parcels, especially 78, 73A7, which is where that future extension of Rolkin Road is identified in the Pantops master plan. So that extension could still occur in the future whenever the county decides to move forward with that project. There were no unfavorable factors identified with these applications. So looking at staff's recommendation, staff does recommend approval of the zoning map amendment ZMA 2020-13. And staff also recommends approval of the special use permit request to amend the special use permit for the auto superstore SP 2021-10 with the following conditions. So these are the 6 conditions. They are the same conditions that were approved with the original SP from 2002, the only change being that the conditions that discussed or talked about required the landscaping easement on the adjacent parcel had been removed, but all of the other conditions remain the same. These are the suggested motions for the special use permit, and these are the suggested motions for the zoning map amendment when we get to that portion of the meeting this evening. And so I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rideabout. Does anyone have any questions for staff on this application? It's kind of confusing. Mr. Bivens. You're muted.
Happy New Year, Andy. Nice to see you.
Happy New Year.
Could you go back to the slide that actually shows the physical buildings on the adjacent lot? I think it was like one of your 1 or 2, your first or second slide, but you get this aerial. Not that one. Yes, this one. So talk to me a little bit about why we say there aren't any stub outs here, because what I'm struggling with is everyone knows that I have this piece about I sort of struggle with cul-de-sacs and I struggle with properties that aren't connected to other pieces of property. That's just something that drives me crazy. And it seems that there's there's an opportunity to connect from either Abbey Road into this site or from, what's the other road? Or Hanson Road into the site, instead of having them come in, having to create another entrance on the 250. And wondered if that had ever been given any sort of conversation or any traffic while you were talking with the applicant on this project.
Yes, staff had recommended that early in the review that the applicant look at trying to connect with these travelways near, this is a bank down at the corner of Hanson Road and 250, and then some office buildings. However, those are all parking lots and private travelways owned by those property owners. They are not public roads. So it would require the approval of those property owners to allow the property owner of the proposed hotel to use those. And my understanding is that the applicant did try to reach out to them and nothing was able to come of that. So they may be able to provide some more information on that. And then I think the other issue is that there is some topographical challenges too, that this site where the hotel is proposed is significantly lower in elevation than the office buildings in the bank directly next door.
Thank you. It just seems that when we look at these types of projects, particularly as we drive up 29, most of the hotels which are there actually are part of something larger. So if nothing else, if there was a way to create a pathway for people to walk to the various restaurants that are in there, as opposed to having to get in their vehicles, drive 100 yards back into the shopping center that's just something that I'd like to figure out a way for us to encourage, as opposed to having you're right next to a place. Why you couldn't be able to communicate with that big commercial center, that commercial activity there. That just it seems that troubled me when I read the project. Okay, thank you. But thank you.
Other questions or comments for staff before we hear from the applicant? Mr. Missel and then Mr. Claiborne.
Thank you. Andy, nice to meet you. Great staff report. Thanks. It was very thorough. Just one quick question. The easement next to the SunTrust Bank that you showed on the concept plan as needing to be, or as being required to be maintained. I'm just curious I didn't see any grading on that site. Do you know whether that maintenance or remaining, when it says to remain, does that mean it will be undisturbed? And maybe this is a question for the applicant, or do you know if that is requiring additional landscaping to be replaced if it is disturbed? How does that
Yeah, so they are proposing to keep the easement there, and that any landscaping required by that, if it is disturbed during the construction of this hotel, that it would be replanted in the manner to ensure that the conditions of the easement are maintained. And the applicant may be able to provide more information on that as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Mr. Claiborne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions, Andy, and you probably know off the top of your head, but the first one is, where's the closest transit stop to this? Do you know?
I do not. I would have to look into that and get back with you on that.
Okay, and no worries. And the second question, I read in the report, I believe it's part of Smart Scale, I'm not sure, but there's some anticipated improvements to get rid of that center turn lane, going up 250, to put in some medians, just to more control when you make that left turn. If you had to give a range, I know we're crystal balling, but do you know when those improvements would be done to coincide with the construction of this? Or is it 12, 15 years out? Like, can you crystal ball that? Or?
So my understanding is that that project is in the planning stage, and I believe it has already been funded to, yes, this might show it best, but the center lane in 250, that's turn lane for both sides, would be removed, and a median would be placed in there to prevent turning left into all the various driveways along 250, and there would only be median breaks at certain intersections. And so, yes, my understanding is that that is well on its way moving forward. And I don't know if Mr. Rapp or Ms. Ragsdale or someone maybe has anything else to add on that.
Yeah, as Mr. Radobock mentioned, it is funded. It is a funded project. It was awarded. I don't believe they have allocated a specific year yet as to when they will move forward with it. They're kind of in the process of doing that at the state level with Vdot. I can look into it, see if I can find it over the next few minutes. But it's not multiple years. It's within the next few years. Typically, those projects are around a 4-year plus or minus time frame. And it just kind of depends on the availability of funding each year.
Thanks. That was very helpful. And so if you can find that out, that would be great. But I would imagine too, it would take a few years for this site to be developed also. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for staff? I just signify by Luis.
Just one quick question, Andy. I thought I read, I'm trying to find it right now, I can't, but there was a setback that they were looking to also reduce or eliminate, a setback requirement. Did I?
Yeah, so there was an application submitted, a special exception application to reduce the step back on the hotel for any structures over 3 stories or 40 feet. We do require a step back. And so that application had been submitted so that they could do a 4-story hotel. However, they have come back and they've just a couple weeks ago, resubmitted to the ARB some revised plans where they have redone the grading and put the bottom floor kind of underground so that it would be only 3 stories visible above grade and from 250. And so that would, so they would no longer need the step back application or the step back to be waived for that if they've dropped it down to just the 3 stories above grade. So that is something that staff is still looking at to make sure and would be verified for sure before it goes to the Board of Supervisors. But yes, that's where that stands on the step back.
Okay, yeah, that was my read on it. It still seemed to be an open question if they were going to redesign so there would only be 3 stories instead of 4. But okay, thank you.
We can revisit that again, but
Yeah.
certainly that is a condition that could be placed upon this if necessary, if that's unclear. So perhaps when we get to that point in the evening, our county attorney could tell us a little bit about whether we need to get to that level of detail with this application. So with that, does anyone else have any questions for staff before we move to hearing from the applicant? Okay, it is a somewhat confusing application with the strange geography of the parcel. So I wouldn't be surprised if you have more questions, but nevertheless, I think we're now ready to hear the presentation from the applicant. And I don't know if Mr. Shimp or who will be making that presentation.
Yes, that will be me, Justin
Okay,
Shimp.
welcome.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. Justin Shimp. I'm the engineer for the project. I have Kelsey Schlein with me, who worked on a lot of the application materials for this. And you're right, it's a little complicated because of all the history. So I don't have a lot to add to staff's presentation from a standpoint of technical items. I can give maybe a little context to how some of the things came to be. Let me do a brief presentation that I will share with everyone here. Everyone see that, all right? Okay, so let me first, I guess, answer a couple of questions that came up that I do have some answers to. One, Kelsey was able to check while we were talking. There is a transit stop at the Applebee's, actually, so very close by. That's here, the hill. We did approach the neighbors at the Truist Bank about a connection through, really more for pedestrians because there's a significant grade issue, and I'll have some illustrations of that make that connection physically near impossible. But we did approach them from a pedestrian standpoint, but we're not able to make any progress. There is a sidewalk along 250 that connects to our project. So you could fairly easily walk from the site up into the, say, Applebee's, Bojangles, by Havana Ridge Shopping Center. The location, I think everyone's familiar with it. It's a simple place mark, though, if you're not, is it's right across the street from Tip Top Restaurant, which I'm sure many of you have been around a long time, have stopped by a time or two. I know I have. Let's see if I can click through the next slide. This just gives you a little context, a color image of the sort of limits of the original zoning. So the red boundary is the PDMC district, which we seek to amend. Back at the same time, there was this little strip in yellow in the far left corner there was zoned to highway commercial, which is part of was always a Dennis Enterprises car dealer. It's a different car dealer now, but that was done at the same time. The special use permit that we're seeking to amend tonight is related to that parcel. This is the original zoning application plan. You'll see we've gotten a little bit, we used our technology to our advantage a little more since this was done in 2002, roughly. And this actually, I think, is a copy of a 1998 map that was amended in 2002.
Mr. Shimp, I don't mean to interrupt you, but could you, do you have a way to enlarge your presentation? A couple of commissioners are saying it's hard to see because a lot of us are on laptops instead of in the county auditorium.
I'm sorry about
Something
that.
you can do.
Oh, thank you for interrupting me. Let me see. I have got it shared, so I was working this earlier, as large as I can get it on my screen. Let me just try one different type of setting quickly.
And while he's doing that, we should not be counting this time against him.
Technology, just when I thought I had gotten figured out.
And for the commissioners, the other thing you can do is to slide your slider bar and shrink all of our heads to little tiny squares, and that will help a little bit with seeing. Okay.
Is that any better?
It's images are clearer, but just, I guess, just carry on. We'll muddle through.
Okay.
Get out
yeah,
your magnifying
apologize.
glasses.
Okay, so this is the, as was mentioned earlier, the master plan. We highlight this mainly because the hotel is actually a primary use in this district. The zoning, often we try to be a little more generic in these zoning application plans, where we'll say, well, this could be any of these particular uses. This particular plan is really saying it's going to be this hotel. And that somewhat follows along with the history of this particular parcel, where there was kind of a block by block designation. I know you have a hard time reading this, but if you go back to this old map, this was high volume retail. This was the grocery shopping center. It was actually an office here once upon a time with a church. Our site actually was a hotel once upon a time. It was changed to office, and now we're back trying to get a portion of it as a hotel. So, the benefits of these zoning districts are you can create a bit of a planned, master plan for them, but then you have to go back sometimes and amend that through this process. You saw this map earlier, just to refresh everyone's memory on these easements to be vacated here. So there are two being removed, which is the light pink here, which is tied to the special use permit for the auto place. Strangely, the special use permit conditions for the auto storage display of vehicles contained a condition on a property, an adjacent property. It's actually not even clear to us that the owner of the parcel A7, our parcel, couldn't violate the easement for the special use permit. It was sort of done seemingly a little last minute when it was processed. And looking back now through the file, we couldn't find any particular evidence from the staff or the county, landscape planners, why it was even included. It seemed like it was sort of added on at the board meeting back when this was all approved. Similar, the conservation easement area was a discussion of some trees that would remain. But I think if you saw from the picture that staff had, there really are very few trees in that zone. Again, we couldn't find any particular evidence as to why that was there or why it was important. So those are proposed to be removed and to be replaced with the hotel and its associated parking. And that's why I said this is a bit more specific of an application than we would normally submit. But this parcel, I think the county staff and others wanted to really see more specific design, given it's a challenging parcel, and to flush through these issues like how would pedestrians get around, how are vehicle points, what could be done here. And so we've shown a pretty specific plan to address that. Question came up about the future Vdot improvements, and we've heard this from a few folks in the neighborhood meeting and all. Just curious. So this is funded. I'm actually meeting with the Vdot engineers on this tomorrow, Thursday morning, one of the other commercial sites, looking at the impact of that particular site. But what you'll have is immediate, essentially, all the way from what is the Wawa, all the way up to the entrance to Hanson Road. So this will be a right in, right out only situation. And Vdot has determined that's going to make entrances and traveling safer up and down the corridor. I can bring this back if anyone has any specific questions about it. This will probably be helpful to folks.
All right, go ahead.
This will be helpful to folks, I think. This is a rendering from design development that shows the view from the entrance at Route 250. It gives you a little context to grades. You can see on the left there is the bank drive-through, and through the trees is the office building. So I think we are to 25 or 30 feet below the office building location with our first floor. And then I've got one more picture I'll show you all. This gives you a little better view. We come up a little bit, and it shows you how we've stepped. You'll notice the end of the building is 3 stories now. One of the ARB comments was to try to integrate this site into the slope a little better than we had. And so we've essentially picked up the grade on one side and created a little bit of a walkout type condition, just to, from the street side, hold a 3-story appearance. It also gives us a nice little side patio that folks can use. So I think that is the main items I wanted to go over. I know there's a lot of technical things in this, but just as the simple way to think about it is that there were basically in the 2003, 2002 special use permit and rezoning, a variety of these easements that were placed on, again, we don't know why, but sort of last minute. And then as the master plan has evolved, we've thought through what this corridor could look like more. And we've essentially created a plan that follows those guidelines and then works with the ARB guidelines for design on a site like this. So at the end of the day, maybe we're wiping the slate clean a little bit on something that was cobbled together over a few different approvals over a long time ago. And that probably, like, now we wouldn't go to the board and add an easement sort of last minute these days because something like this would happen 20 years later. So I think this is just an example of cleaning up some of those things and getting a project that does match the master plan. Happy to answer any questions. Say we have Doug, as representative of the owner, on the call, and Kevin, who's the architect who prepared deeds. So happy to answer any questions as they come up.
Okay, are there questions from the commission for the applicant? Mr. Claiborne.
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. Thank you, Mr. Shep. One question is, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the property, the quality of the hotel. What do you think is the target audience, just so the folks in the public can get a better feel for that? Is this long-term stay? What's the thought?
Sure, I can share what I know. I do want to caveat that with the way that the zoning works. Effectively, we could start with one kind of hotel and it could be changed to a different one. The county doesn't actually classify between, like, let's say, an extended stay and a more traditional hotel. So there has been a thought here for more of an extended stay type hotel, has been what the owner has been looking at. And so that's what has been submitted to the ARB. And I think they're looking at, continuing down that path. But I just, to all those out there, is caution the zoning that we're setting could allow that to be changed basically to a more conventional hotel.
And then last question, I think in your package, I think I saw a circulation plan. And for pedestrians, I think you were suggesting that they would walk along the sidewalk up 250 that go into Applebee's, whatever it may be. I'm just curious, are there any conversations about softening that travel path? I'm not sure if you ever walked along 250. Sometimes I run along that route when it's not sub-zero out. It's not pleasant with cars zipping by at about 50 or 55 mile an hour. So I'm just wondering, has any conversation about maybe softening that experience, as you walk from the hotel to the shopping center?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, certainly we were cognizant of that early on and made an effort to try to connect. As you can see here, it is possible to put some stairs in and connect up to the SunTrust, which would be the preferred route. But those property owners just were not amenable to that sort of request. It does help that you are at this, there's a turn lane. In this particular location, there's a turn lane coming in. So it's the very beginning of that turn lane. So traffic is merging over to turn right into the, I don't know if on my map will show that. If I go back a couple. So yeah, so traffic is just merging here to turn over into the right turn lane. So you do have a little bit of a reduced speed condition there. I have taken that walk. I've occasionally drop a vehicle off at Pantops at a car dealer and walk to my office on downtown. And it's a walk of busy traffic in places, but we didn't really have another option here. We did think about it, but I do think for the short distance and for the fact that the turn lane there, it's a little better than the normal condition. But you're right, it's not maybe the ideal pedestrian experience. We think it is something that's workable.
Thank you, sir.
The questions from the commission, Mr. Bivens?
Perhaps, good to see you, Justin. Happy New Year to you and your team. I'm still going to I'm going to push on this piece here. I think many of us saw what happened on at Stonefield, where there was a connection between Stonefield and then the property that's above it, and they put stairs in. I think people may be aware of that, and there's a small community of commercial stuff behind that sort of linked the two. And what I've heard from everyone involved is that's created a nexus and created a flow between those two pieces of property that everyone's pleased about. And so I'm disturbed that the caring bank, which is what Truist is sort of using as its new marketing language as it goes from being SunTrust and BB&T, that Truist is not willing to at least not even willing to consider a stairway or a slope or something so people don't have to go on Route 250 as Corey was sharing with us. And I would suggest if that's not a possibility, perhaps talking to our economic development people and perhaps is aware to have said, this is helpful to you. You want Truist, the bank that cares. You want people to be able to walk by you. They can go to your ATM. It sort of creates a nexus of caring, because I'm sorry. That's probably the softest word that I can say. I'm sorry that they're not willing to at least provide some means for people, if this should go forward with the supervisor's approval, some means for people to come from that piece to join the commercial sector there. I'm baffled by a stairway or an entrance walkway would get a no or no response. So I guess my sense is to have a conversation with our economic development, because perhaps they can often get a conversation, arrange for a conversation that's between the parties.
Okay, certainly. I mean, we're happy to try to do that. It just, we could get no traction. I think the unfortunate thing is when you have these pathways across privately owned property is the attorneys always get involved and talk about liability. And then everybody kind of shuts down about it. And that seems to do these things in, but we'll certainly not opposed to reaching out and trying to push that forward. I'm not optimistic.
There's no more liability than the other buildings which are over there. There's probably the people who work there still use it. I mean, I used to go there a lot to eat at. There's a couple of restaurants I used to, and there were always people at noon walking from those businesses. So hopefully they'll see this as extending their community and not necessarily be so focused on the liability there. But I would recommend that if you work with staff, maybe they can connect you up with the economic development office to advance at least that one piece of it.
That's it?
That's it for me, Chair.
Sure. Okay. Anyone else have a yes, Mr. Missel?
Hi, Justin. Nice to see you again. Just a couple of quick questions. One, just to confirm what staff said, the landscape easement. It looked like from your grading plan that it won't be impacted by grading. Is that accurate?
For the most part, there's a little bit of grading. If you see where our retaining wall clips the corner of it here, we have a little bit of grading in that zone, but that's the only, and I guess the other end. But certainly it's already a steep slope. So disturbing that doesn't really help us any. It makes even more grading work than already exist. So we are disturbing it slightly, but any trees that are disturbed will be replaced per the original site plan for that project. But I would say it's, a portion, it's a quarter of it is being disturbed or something on those lines, not the whole thing.
Sure. Okay. That's helpful. Thanks. I guess for what it's worth, if, the plantings that are planned to go back could be supplemented to a point where it would help with, some screening and some adjoining property softening. If there's some additional planting that could be added in there, even beyond the original landscape easement that didn't foresee the development that you're proposing, I think that might be helpful. So it may be worth taking a look at that since the conditions are different. Second thing I just wanted to clarify is the building is still 4 stories, correct? Even though there are only 3 that are visible from the entrance corridor.
Yes, that's correct. I believe it will be classified as a 4-story. code at the front entrance, which you'll in this picture is sort of in the middle. It would be a 4-story building. Up on the street side, it's a 3-story. I expect by building code, it's going to be still called a 4-story building. It's partially.
Yep, got it. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand exactly this image. It seems like the side that's facing 250 is actually just in the ground 1 story, right? In fact, it is still a 4-story building.
Correct. Yes, the grade. And this picture doesn't quite show it right. There's a retaining wall along the corner, so that where you see kind of 4 windows at that front right corner. Those 2 are really going to be down below a retaining or with a retaining wall between them and the sidewalk. Kind of more of like almost an English basement situation where those are egress window rather than a full window.
Okay. The question was relative, obviously, to the special exception, and I know that's still being discussed. But I'm not sure if it's entirely true to say that only 3 stories are visible from the entrance corridor, especially if it's in keeping with your model. It seems like you would see the 4 stories at kind of an oblique angle. So just for what it's worth.
Oh yeah, no, we agree. And just to clarify, the setback issue really comes as a technicality of it's the facing the side of the building which faces 250 is how it's measured. So yes, I do believe it's a 4-story building. We're not trying to say it's anything other than that. Other than at this one end, it's again a kind of zoning technicality, and it was a result of some of the comments the ARB had, which is trying to soften up that grade drop and try to integrate a little more grade in the building rather than having it all on 4-story.
Understood. Okay, great. Thanks. The last question, I guess, do you have any idea, this is probably an unfair question for you, but the adjoining sort of remainder, the triangular parcel, that's the Happy Boxes, Pantops LLC parcel. Any idea what the future development plans are for that parcel? Have you heard anything? I'm just curious.
I have not heard anything about that parcel. I believe there's still like a site plan, maybe a preliminary plan for storage building of sorts that may or may not be valid still, but we haven't done anything on that property.
And the only reason part of the reason I asked that is because it is somewhat wooded now, I think, so it provides a little bit of a buffer, but also to Commissioner Viven's point, you have retaining walls, I think, along the edge of your property entirely on that side. So it would be challenging. And I guess the question is, would you ever consider or want to consider some sort of pedestrian interconnection between those 2 parcels, and would that even be possible?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly, nothing is impossible for a pedestrian connection because, folks can use stairs. I think from a vehicular standpoint, that's pretty much a non-starter. Again,
sure.
We are on the side of Pantops Mountain, so we're dealing with that grade. But yeah, I don't think there's any particular problem with that. I don't know when that would come up. Maybe I don't know if it's probably a site plan connectivity question, but we don't have an objection to that certainly. Though we don't know if it would be necessary or make sense depending on what use went there.
Great, thank you. That's all I had. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to ask a question of the applicant before I move to the public hearing and hear from the questions or comments from the public? Okay, seeing none at this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing portion. Carolyn, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, I do. Dick Ruff, please state your name, address. If you're affiliated with a group or organization and you have 3 minutes to start talking, please unmute yourself and you can start talking at any time.
Who are you addressing?
All right, you can start.
My question has to do with the access onto 250. Do you move from Overlook Hotel onto the through lanes, or is there a way to make the access, the exit from the hotel onto the right turn lane that goes to Hanson?
That's a question for the applicant. They will be coming back to answer any questions that came up during the public hearing process. Is there anything else you want to speak about, Mr. Ruffin?
No. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We'll have the applicant address it when they come back up. Carolyn, is there anyone else signed up to speak?
No, ma'am, there sure isn't.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then we will, then I guess just to ask the council, do we close the public hearing now to go back to the applicant, or is it still part of the public hearing?
Part of the public hearing.
Okay, great. So we have a chance for the applicant to offer any additional comments, as well as to answer the question that was brought up by a member of the public. So we'll go back to you, Mr. Schimpf.
Thank you. Yes, I think, well, as to the pulling out on the turn lane, I think that once the median is built, which I think is supposed to start in like 2026, so it would be fairly shortly aligned with the construction or very shortly thereafter, you know, people would basically pull out and head east only, which I think makes for a much safer maneuver out of here, a little less convenient, but I think you would naturally make that move into the turn lane. You would have no room to kind of go totally across. People will do strange things in the road sometimes. I think Vdot puts these concrete medians and things up to limit that to the extent they can. But I think as long as people are coming out making a right turn, and the risk of impacts or accidents is going to go down this location.
Okay, thanks for answering that question. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we go back to the commission?
No, nothing else to add. I'll be happy to answer the questions that come up if we miss something during our presentation.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, so we'll close the public hearing, back to the commission for discussion. Mr. Bivens. You're still muted. Yeah, there you go.
When I've been having this year, it's sort of the New Year thing. I wonder if this is it's time for a new computer, maybe. So if I'm understanding what and this is for Mr. Rapp and staff. So if I'm understanding what's being planned there, coming from east to west, the only way to access easily this project, if it moves forward, is to turn left onto Rockland Road, and then how do you get there? How would you get there? Or would you have to go past the hotel, make a U-turn to come back there? Andy?
Yeah, I can answer that. My understanding is that if you're coming from the east from 64 and you'd want to go to this hotel, you would have to take Route 250 west, past the hotel, make a U-turn at the next available intersection where there's a median break, and then come back eastbound on 250 to make a right into the hotel property.
And all because we can't get an entrance off of Abbey Lane. Okay. Okay. The other question I have is following up on our Commissioner Fred's comments. Then, given your absolute astute observation there, and thank you for that, sir, I think we need to deal with the special exception. I think Fred's point, pushing our eye to that, means that, you know, it's a 4-story building. And, you know, I would like us to at least have some discussion about that so the supervisors can see that we've actually wrestled with it a bit. And thank you, Fred, for bringing our eye to that.
I could comment on that as well, but it's any other comments on that anyone wants to make? Mr. Rapp, go ahead. And then Luis.
Not on that topic. I just wanted to give an update on the Vdot project.
Okay.
So that what they call starting development, which is the design, engaging the public, right of way, kind of is meant to take place towards the end of 2023. That will commence for about 3 years, with construction starting in March of 2027 as of now. So right at that 4-year mark is when you're going to hit construction, I would say. So 4 to 5 years before that's completed.
Okay, that was helpful. Thank you, Luis.
Yes, I mean that's the reason I also brought up that step back issue. I wasn't clear, certainly from the report, exactly how that was being dealt with, and I guess after seeing the renderings, I still have some concerns. the renderings and the site plan, I'm not quite sure that the renderings and the site plan are in sync. Maybe they were just at different stages. The site plan shows some curved retaining walls that wrap on the street side. So that would be the west side of the building, I believe. So the 250 side, where in the renderings, obviously you're not seeing that. I do think that the last rendering that we saw where the walkways are trying to use the topography is a good use. However, I think some of the lack of landscape around there hinder that approach. And then also the issue, I mean, it clearly is still a 4-story building, although it does help to have the ramp go up. I'm just not quite sure how that aligns with the retaining walls that we were seeing on the site plan.
Well, we have had some discussion already about the as Mr. Missel said, the sort of oblique angle by which you might still consider it a 4-story building. And there will be some vegetation removed by the construction of the building. So certainly, as part, my opinion, council can contradict me if needed, but you would be able to add a condition for additional landscaping or screening if you felt like that would help to soften that. You certainly don't have to exempt them from the proposed step back. That is another tool in our toolbox for this evening. If you feel that there are some solutions that the commission might recommend in a motion, we certainly can add those to the suggested staff motion. I know sometimes it's hard to construct those on the fly, but we do it all the time. Mr. Missel.
Thank you. To me, I think it's sort of basically two issues running in parallel. One is the aesthetic issue, which actually when I was on the ARB, I remember seeing this. And so I don't want to speak for the ARB, but part of the reason for actually lowering it and nestling it into the site, as I think Mr. Ship said, was because it would mitigate the aesthetic impact of that height from the entrance corridor. So that's sort of one parallel track. The other track is, what does the height regulation say? And so I guess my point was, those feel to me like they're more independent things. And I don't know enough about the code specific to height regulations, although I was trying a quick Google search and couldn't find it. But I would be interested to know more. And maybe this is what staff was getting at when they said that this was still in discussion or something like that. But I'd be interested to know what the actual requirement is relative to building height in this district. And I think those two might be independent, the aesthetic and the requirement for building height step back.
Andy or Charles, would like to comment on the actual regulation regarding step back of a 4-story structure, how far it has to be stepped back. I think one of the challenges for a hotel type structure could be that stepping it back could basically get rid of a row of rooms. Whether they could be a beautiful rooftop terrace garden is another conversation, but could you comment on just the regulation itself? And just before you do that, quickly for Mr. Missel's benefit, that this is all part of why the Planning Commission exists, because many things are not quite so straightforward. And so we have the opportunity to wrestle with these unique situations and come up with our own recommended solutions. But for now, Mr. Radebach, if you could just tell us, refresh us on the regulation for how much needs to be stepped back and what condition.
So I think Ms. Ragsdale is going to provide some information on this issue.
Okay, great. Rebecca.
Hello, good evening. The requirement is for for over the 3rd story or 40 feet or above, that there be a step back of 15 feet. And parallel to the rezoning and the special use permit review has been the ARB review on the building. So in this case, we're relying on the ordinance. And if they do need the step back, that can be waived or modified by the Board of Supervisors. And we had been relying on the ARB feedback to this point as far as what would be appropriate at that location. So I think there's sort of the technical aspect of it is how you get there to the design that's appropriate. It is a newer design that we've seen as we were wrapping up the staff report. So that's where we are in the process. So if you have specific concerns about the appropriateness of a step back there, or if you like what you see, it's not an issue. It's just, maybe they need a waiver, maybe they don't. But if you're okay with the way it's constructed or proposed with the concept so far, it's 3 stories and working with the grade. And then as you go back from 250, it is a 4-story building. But if there are specific comments that you'd like to make, we can certainly consider that as we go forward. But primarily to date, it's been the ARB weighing in on that and then staff deciding technically whether you need the step back waiver or not. This is a relatively new design and we don't have I think a site section might help with that. But that's what I'd suggest as far as moving between the commission and the board. The board's always happy to have your feedback as well on special exceptions.
Okay, did that answer? It's clearly as mud in the planning commission. It was a good response. It's just our job is always difficult. That's all we get are the difficult projects. We're not looking at anything that's straightforward usually. I shouldn't say anything, but go ahead.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, I think, Rebecca, thank you. You used the word technical, and that's, I was thinking sort of technical and aesthetic, right? They're those 2 pieces. Personally, when I read the code and it talks about every story that begins above 40 feet, minimum step back of 15 feet or more, to me, that's the technical requirement. I think that still applies. I don't know why it wouldn't, to be honest. But maybe there is, if there's precedent that says aesthetically, an aesthetic of it being only visible as 3 stories is sufficient to no longer require a waiver, then I can see supporting that. But my sense is it's really more about the technical piece that you're mentioning. So I would support that approach.
Mr. Herrick?
I'll defer to our planners on the technical requirements. I think procedurally, though, the applicant has requested a special exception as an application or request pending. And unless and until it withdraws that request, I think it's entitled to a commission recommendation one way or the other on that special exception request. So my suggestion from a procedural perspective would be that the commission make recommendations on the ZMA, the SP application, and the special exception request unless and until any of them is withdrawn.
And if I may, I think part of the rationale that was provided in the application that was made in writing by the applicant's own request is that the building was far enough back from 250 that somewhat mitigated the effect of the 3 stories, that the step back requirement is trying to avoid that sort of dark cavern approach. And yet 250 is a wide road. And the building is not right up against the road as some structures might be. So, that's where I think it's in our purview to say, yes, we do technically support this standard of the county. It makes sense. It has its place. But in this particular instance, it is not necessary to impose that in order to fulfill a harmonious design that is, not overshadowing the pedestrians even and the joggers who are running down the road even further. So it certainly, I like to be by the book as much as possible myself, but I think that this is one where we can use some of our discretion. So, and these things don't necessarily have to be linked. You could decide that the step back is not necessary, but that you also do feel that in order to soften the feel of a 4-story building on one side, that you still would like to request additional landscaping. So that's just some of the things to consider. I'll also say one really quick comment is that it's it's not a rule, it's not the law, but it's my opinion that it's always helpful for motions to come from the commissioner whose district it is. Like I said, not required, but I feel preferred because they're the representative for that area. So are there other comments or questions or thoughts on the way forward before we see if there's anyone willing to entertain a motion? Corey.
Madam Chair, I want to go back to Commissioner Bivens. He had made a comment about how do you access the site, and you brought up a really good point. If we're going down 250 to have to make a U-turn, where is that next available spot? Is it Stony Point Road? Or I'd like to kind of get a better understanding of that and how that plays out against that smart scale project. Like to have some dialogue about that. How do we feel about that? We feel like that's safe. Anything we want to add to that context of the conversation?
Sure.
So Commissioner Claiborne, I believe that smart scale project has not been fully designed. You know, what you saw, Mr. Schimpf shared is a conceptual concept. And so that's where over the next couple of years, they'll be working through all that, figuring out what that is based on trip generation and requirements for turning and identifying those best locations for those crossing movements there. But we're a few years out from knowing the specifics of exactly what turning movements will be allowed and where they break. Right now, you just have, an open lane. So the idea is to restrict that and really bring some of those vehicular movements to specified areas where it's most safe. So they'll have to go through a process.
So it's awkward at present, and perhaps will be better, but not perfect by any stretch, to have to go up and do these U-turns. And then you have people from out of town, assuming, because they're going to a hotel, that they're trying to get up to the next turn and figure out how to turn around and come back and get across. So I guess the one question to consider is whether any business that was being put in that location would have to have the same situation. Now, is this simply, a problem for this hotel, or is this a problem regardless of, before it was to be an office building, people would also be arriving every day and coming and going for lunch and running errands. So we have a lot of traffic problems and traffic design issues plaguing Route 250, and the sheer volume of traffic is also a problem. But I think considering whether this will be a problem regardless of who occupies that site, seems to me, I don't know, I wish I could redesign all of Pantops from the scratch if I had my way, but we're kind of trying to claw our way back to some sort of reasonable traffic pattern. And I assume that since if this project were to be approved, or any other future project, that the Vdot work to design the crossovers would take this into account. So is there further discussion, or Daniel, go ahead.
Not further discussion. I say I think this has been a great conversation, and 250 is, from a transportation, is challenging, but as you, I think, rightfully pointed out, in some sense, if the use is a hotel, it generates trips, but it would likely generate less than an office building or some other type of doctor's facility or something that has trips going in and out. They would likely come in the morning, afternoon. And so I think that's what we have to wrestle with. But based on that, I think, a hotel, this use and the plan laid out, or the conceptual plan presented to us, is well thought out. I think, the use of the topography and incorporating the building into it lessens my concerns about the setback requirement. It does create a kind of, I have what's considered a 2-story house, but I have a walkout basement. So is it a 3-story? Is it a 2-story? And I know it's a gray area, and based on the way the plans have been laid out, I don't have any major concerns with it personally, and I would be inclined to support this application in the special exceptions.
Other commissioners want to make a comment? Julian.
Chair, I would support this project also, and I would also.
We lost your sound again for some reason. Go ahead.
It's definitely time for a new computer. So I support this project too, and in keeping with Fred's suggestion and Luis's suggestion about the treatment in the front, I know that's not our issue, but to at least get in the notes that there's some consideration about how do you buffer this, because effectively now that we're fully aware that the entrance is going to be from 250 East. Okay, it's effectively going to be a 4-story building. And so how do we, while it may sit on the side in a way that makes that more appropriate in the way that Fred was discussing it, I think how we sort of create that so that it in fact has some aesthetic and also works for people walking up and down that area or running up and down that area. Corey, we really need to talk about your extracurricular activities. That, you know, how we create that space that sense there is something that I would like to see a condition about the landscaping or the treatment of the entrance of there. And I know that's not our thing, but at least the consideration of that as we move this forward, or if we move this forward. But I support it.
Well, to your point, somebody could on the commission recommend additional landscaping in that area without getting into the nitty-gritty details of, you know, how many shrubs or trees or flowers, or, you know, could leave that to the discretion of staff to work with the applicant on perhaps improving some of the screening around the lower corner. Any other comments on this application from the commission? Luis, is that what, did I see your hand go up? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Bivens and also Chair Firehawk in terms of your point of the distance that this hotel would be from the street. So I think it's far enough away that really a setback would be meaningless, even if it is a 4-story building. So I don't think that's from a visual standpoint is going to have much of an impact given how far it is. I do think that what we're seeing is still fairly conceptual, and I'm not quite sure that the complexity of the topography is and the retaining walls that we would wind up with are fully vetted yet, perhaps. And I do think there's opportunity to bring back some landscape. I know that there is a section of the site that looks bare. However, it's also quite wooded towards the back, and we're losing some of those trees as well. So I think there is an opportunity to think about how we mitigate the 4 stories a little bit more with landscape, and then really introduce that 3-story elevation with the ramp up that they're doing, which I think is effective or can be effective. So I would encourage that and look at how we buffer with landscape and provide more trees towards the front of the site to help mitigate the visual impact of the 4 stories.
Okay. And any type of condition such as that is definitely in keeping with, you know, the offsetting the impact of this particular structure. So it is very much within our purview to add such a condition. So let me ask if, and I'm not trying to squelch discussion, anyone's free to make another point, but is someone prepared to make a motion at this point, keeping in mind some of the concerns that the commission has raised so far? Mr. Claiborne.
I think I'm prepared to make a motion if that's all right with you, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
If I could get that. Am I right that there's 3 separate motions, right? There's the zoning text, then there's we could get those pulled up. And so make sure I'm correct. So taking the context of our conversation, that applies predominantly to the special exception. Is that correct, Councilor?
I'm sorry, could you clarify what applies to the special exception?
So when I make these additional conditions, right? So one on the landscaping, I think we talked quite a bit about the pedestrian connection and exploring some kind of connection between the existing site and the bank and the rest of commerce, whether it's through stairs, whatever it may be. Those are the 2 conditions that I've jotted down, that and the landscaping piece. Would that go for the exception? Is that correct?
But you would need to specify which of the matters you wanted to add that condition to. The current motions that Mr. Reidelbach has prepared talks about the conditions recommended in the staff report. At this point, the only conditions in the staff report that are recommended are for the special use permit. So to the extent that the commission wanted to recommend additional conditions, you would need to specify which of the items you wanted to attach those conditions to.
Okay, thank you. I think I can get it figured out. It's a little complex here. It's actually this complex with all these motions. So we'll take it one at a time. It looks like I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of SP 2021-10 Auto Superstore SP amendment recommended by staff in the staff report. I think for that one, we leave it as is. I can't remember what the conditions were, but I think we'll leave that one as is. So.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bailey. Discussion? Not seeing any hands from the commission, so there's no discussion. Carolyn, would you call the question?
Yes, Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bailey.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the motion passes unanimously. Staff, could you please help us by calling up the next, I don't know what to call it, element? Motion element? Motion piece?
So I'll give this one a shot. I believe this is where I will add the context of our conversation as to additional conditions. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZMA 2020-13 Overlook Hotel Pantops PDMC amendment for the reasons stated in the staff report, and with the following two conditions. Condition one is that the applicant takes on the exploration of how to have a pedestrian connection between this property and the adjacent bank property so that folks can walk to other areas of commerce. And then the second condition was that additional landscaping be provided towards the front of the property at 250 that recognizes that the building is approaching 250 East. I'm hoping I got that close to it.
And Mr. Claiborne, if I could just clarify, what you're recommending are actually recommendations, because this is a rezoning. So what you've just recommended would be recommendations rather than conditions.
Yes, sir. I know you would keep me out of trouble. So yes.
But provided you're agreeable to that, you've made a motion to approve the rezoning with those recommendations, assuming that that's what you intended to move.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what it is. So, all right. So I think I got it.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry. I think, was it Daniel seconded? There was multiple seconds.
Me or Louise,
Right.
you can take your pick.
All right, we'll pick you, Daniel, for this time. Okay, so we've had a second discussion. Mr. Missile.
One discussion point, I think, Andy, you mentioned that the applicant was requesting a special exception. Do we have to address that specifically, or is that part of this motion?
So the special exception would be handled separately.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion, questions, comments, requests to amend? Right, hearing none or seeing no hands. Carolyn, would you call the question?
Mr. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries unanimously to recommend this to the Board of Supervisors. And then we have the special exception request, I believe is next. And finally, right.
All right. I think I messed up on the last one a little bit, but I think I can correct it here. So I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of special exception request SC 2021-16 Overlook Hotel with a recommendation that landscaping be explored at the front of the property to acknowledge the fact there's a 4-story building when approaching 250 East. I think that's what I was supposed to have done the last time, so I apologize. So,
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion. Mr. Claiborne, I had a question for you. When you say landscaping, did you want to be any more specific as to what, are you talking about a meadow? Are you talking about shrubs, trees? What do you want to be more specific?
I prefer not, since it goes before the ARB. Unless I'm not that smart, so.
I'm sure you are. I don't know if perhaps you want to say something such as substantial landscaping or something that would give us signals to
I would say
what you're expecting.
Landscaping that is a concept, that acknowledges the fact that we are trying to mitigate there's a 4-story building, right? We're giving an exception to that step back rule. And so I don't think little shrubs would classify as that.
Okay, so some sort of substantial landscaping that would provide effective screening and softening approach.
Right, recognizing that we're giving that exception to the step back.
Okay. So I don't know that we need to amend the motion for that. I think simply just to perhaps the minutes can acknowledge the conversation that goes with that, unless staff disagrees. Okay. Right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, Carolyn, would you call the question?
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
and Mr. Bailey.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion carries unanimously to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. And with that, we thank the applicants for their good work and the staff as well, and wish you luck with the board as we move on. And I need to find my agenda that's minimized to a tiny, tiny size. Just a second here. Thanks. Okay, sorry. I have so many things open. I'm trying to close them so we can move on. Apologize. Perhaps someone else can tell me what's next on the agenda. I seem to have made my agenda only 4 centimeters wide.
Yeah. We have the STA 2021-000002 maintenance of private improvements. And Mr.
Yes.
Fritz is here to join us.
Thank you very much for that assist. Yes. Can we have the staff report while I try to find my agenda?
I have multiple monitors, so I'm cheating.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on a road trip, so I'm sorry I don't have that fancy schmancy stuff. Go ahead, Mr. Fritz.
The multiple monitors is a lifesaver.
He's also probably got a satellite that's looking at all of us from above.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Bill Fritz, and I'm in the development process manager in the community development department. For those of you who don't know me or may be listening, want to give you some background on this particular project. The Planning Commission adopted a resolution of intent to amend the zoning subdivision ordinance regulations addressing the maintenance of private improvements back in December. Staff had identified a number of issues in the ordinance surrounding the issues of maintenance at that time. And at that time, the resolution that we presented to the Planning Commission, staff was of the opinion that a number of sections would require revision. However, after further review of our ordinance, the ordinance of other localities, and the state code, we determined that the issue of maintenance of private improvements could be addressed by making one significant amendment to one provision. There are some other provisions that need to be changed because they refer to, there's a trickle down effect, but really only needed one change. Before I get into what that change is, let me just summarize the issue for you. If a private improvements are proposed in a subdivision, the ordinance requires the submission of a maintenance agreement. This agreement is reviewed by CDD staff and it's subject to approval by the county attorney. The review of this document is a time and resource consuming exercise. Ultimately, the document does get approved. However, the county is not a party to the agreement. The county cannot interpret or enforce the agreement, and the ordinance doesn't actually require that the document that we've spent so much time preparing be recorded. It needs to be in a form that can be recorded, but it doesn't actually say it needs to be recorded. So to put it bluntly, the county requires an expensive document that has no enforceable value. What we need is something that is enforceable to make sure that these private improvements are in fact maintained. So the ordinance does require a note on the plat that if there are private streets in the subdivision, the note acknowledges that there are private streets in the subdivision. It states that they may not meet VDOT standards and that they will not be maintained by VDOT or Albemarle County. The note does not require maintenance, and it doesn't state that failure to maintain may be a violation of the ordinance. Also, the note only applies to private streets. To address the problem, we've come up with some language, and I'm going to share my screen here. The problem of switching between Zoom and Teams. Can you see my presentation? Great.
Yes.
So what I've got here is for you is, there we go. On the left side is the existing language, and that's what I talked about. If there is a private street, it doesn't meet the standards, won't be maintained. What we're proposing is much more clear. Unless something is noted as public, it is private in nature and will not be maintained by the public. The maintenance is an obligation of the affected lot owners. That's new language. Also new language is that failure to maintain at substantially the same condition as originally approved, so we've established the standard that it has to be maintained, may constitute a violation of the county ordinance. So we go from a simple statement that, hey, there are private streets here, we're not going to maintain them, and that's it, to there are private features here that are not going to be maintained by the public. You are obligated to, lot owners, you are obligated to maintain them, and this is the standard you need to maintain them. It is a much more informative piece of information for anyone who's buying a piece of property and going into that subdivision. And this would apply both to commercial and residential subdivisions. And it puts them on notice that violation may, or failure to maintain may constitute a violation of the ordinance. So we think that is a much more extensive language. It eliminates the need for the county to review a maintenance agreement. Like I said, it establishes the improvements must be maintained by the lot owners, and it establishes the standards. One other thing I'd like to point out, in case you're worried that, hey, wait, there's no maintenance agreement out there. The state code actually includes a Property Owners Association Act. This provision spells out what is required for subdivisions that include privately maintained features. And this provision of the state code is self-acting and doesn't require incorporation into the county code. And as I said before, there are some other provisions of the ordinance that need to be, oops, get back here. So, yeah, trying to stop sharing here. I'm having trouble. There we go. There are some other sections that require revision. So the section dealing with the maintenance agreement, which is section 317, is repealed in its entirety. We also noted that section 235 needs to be amended, and that's actually in your packet. But after the preparation of the report, we noticed that there's another section, section 234, and I can put that up if you want to see it, but it essentially contains language that's the same as in 235. It says, if you have a private improvement, then you also need to submit the document required by 317, and it just needs to be stricken just in the same way 235, which is in your packet, is stricken. That's my presentation. This actually boils down to a fairly simple subdivision text amendment that we think will have a significant impact on workload for the applicant and the county, and actually results in a better situation for enforcement and awareness for lot owners in any particular subdivision. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bivens.
I have just sort of a hypothesis I want to hear you play out on this. So I'm recalling even it was a tragic situation, but when we had the large amount of rain a number of years ago, may have been 5 years ago now, and a bridge going into the back of West Lee failed. There was a tragedy associated with that, but the bridge failed. Those are private roads. So how would the bridge be reconstructed? And if it didn't get, if there was delay in that, what would the county's role be in helping to get someone in that development get the bridge constructed?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because what you're saying there is what's the county's role in helping to restore that? And that would be dependent upon what the Board of Supervisors may want to do. So that's a political question, not a subdivision agent question.
But the main piece there is that there is nothing that would spring from Vdot or spring from the county because of the bridge being washed away.
Correct.
And the characteristic and bridge is considered a private road. Or is it
the bridge it's a private improvement. It's part of the private street.
So it's part of the private improvement. Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. So do we need to? And that's included by the other by 304 or whatever.
We just put an all inclusive. If unless it says it's public, it isn't.
Got it. Thank you. That's all. That was my own question. How do we how does the county spring or how does Vdot spring into that solution when it's particularly in that case a very, very expensive repair?
Right. One thing I didn't include in my presentation, but it's actually in the staff report, and I'll go ahead and say it now because drainage is an issue. Drainage is actually dealt with through a different provision of this and different enabling authority from the state code. And that's dealt with in chapter 17 of the county code. And we're not touching that. That all stays the same. We have different ways of dealing with that. And that seems to be working. We can't take the authority we have for chapter 17 and move it into chapter 14. We're just not enabled to do that.
Thank you. And I have a question for our deputy director. So when we start looking at our comp plan, are we going to actually wrestle with the private roads? We're going to wrestle with that some and see how far that goes or how far it doesn't go, or what the obligations for new developments to have roads that are built to Vdot standards so they can be accepted, so that some of the new communities that come up that are developed in the future don't have to wrestle with this particular ordinance.
I think that was a question for you.
Yeah, there was a question on that, deputy director.
For Charles?
Yes, for Charles. I didn't want to put you in this.
You addressed it to Charles, but you can help Charles out.
I can kind of address it because I was here back when I got here just as the county was dealing with private streets and sort of creating them with standards because there had been problems with standards previously. And that even at that time, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not there should be whether or not private streets should be because of the obligation it placed on the property owners within a subdivision. So has been a debate that has gone on for a very long time. There was also a period in the early 2000s when the Planning Commission actually denied a number of private street requests that then went to the Board of Supervisors. So that's a policy decision, not a. We have the authority to approve private streets, but that's a policy decision if you want to do that. And that gives Charles the opportunity to now jump into what's going to happen in the future. I can talk about what happened in the past, and you can talk about what happened in the future, or what may happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in localities that handle it both ways, and there are drawbacks of both, I will say. It's a debate that we will have as we work through some of our development standards with our upcoming comprehensive plan, with our multimodal transportation plan, and as we kind of adopt some of these more urban street standards and update our ordinance that relates to that. It's one thing we need to expand on is our standards manual for these type of physical public improvements. We do have some now, but I do believe they need to be revisited and flushed out so that we have something more concrete as far as maintenance of those and some of those requirements, so that in the instances that they aren't maintained, we can ensure that we have the means to do so. Yeah.
Other comments, questions, Mr. Missile?
Hey, Bill, good to see you as always. Just a couple of quick questions. I don't mean to wordsmith, but I guess wondering what the word substantially means. So when you say failure to maintain the improvements, it's substantially the same. Seems like it could open up some room for interpretation. And then the second question associated with that would be, what violation of county ordinances might it constitute?
Sure.
Maybe that's too big of a question.
Sure. So obviously, whenever a road is built, as soon as you finish constructing it, it starts to deteriorate. Right. So we didn't want to say exactly the same, because that's not practical. So the best word we can come up with is substantially. We use that language throughout planning activities. When we do special use, you do rezonings and you accept a proffer that it'll be substantially in accord with. So it's language of the art of planning. So we have that there. Is it open to debate and to interpretation? Absolutely. And that would be something that the zoning, this is done by the agent, not the zoning administrator, that the agent would have to analyze to say, it's deteriorated to the point where it is no longer substantially in accord with the previous approval, and then invoke the enforcement provisions of the subdivision ordinance. And there are a variety of things that the agent can do to cause compliance. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Perfectly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments about this proposed change? Okay. Don't see any relatively straightforward need that the county has, and I sort of feel sorry for people who end up with private roads that they didn't realize were private, and now having to take care of them. But that's up to the buyer to figure that out. So with that, is someone prepared to make a motion? And if I can get some clarity too from either Mr. Fritz or our attorney, are we making a motion of intent to consider this, or what are we actually doing?
Ms. Firehawk, this is a public hearing, so you need to open it up to the public first.
Sure. I'm just trying to understand what we were going to be advancing.
But then, Ms. Firehawk, to answer your other question, this is the actual text that Mr. Fritz has recommended, subject to the one modification that he mentioned. There's an additional section that will need to be addressed when this is taken to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so with that, there being no other questions for staff, we'll open the public hearing. Carolyn, do we have anyone signed up to comment?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we'll close the public hearing and return to the commission. There's no comments from the public on this matter at this time, so is there further discussion?
If I may, in the for what it's
sure.
worth category, I did reach out to a number of regular applicants in developing this and received no negative feedback from them. Just thought I'd offer that was something that was done during the development of this language.
That's very helpful to know that you vetted it with some real folks who might be affected by such a change. Great. Okay. So any other discussion by the commission? If not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion. Mr. Bivens.
I move approval of STA 2021-02, maintenance of improvements.
Second, available? Anyone want to make a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Luis. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Carolyn, would you call the question?
Mr. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously, so we'll recommend this change to the Board of Supervisors. The next item on our agenda, now that I've successfully unshrunk my agenda, is if we have any committee reports from the commissioners. Anyone have any committee reports to offer up? Any hands up? Okay, I don't see any. I've concluded my work so far on the capital improvement plan for the county. As I mentioned at our last meeting, there was not a lot of money in the kitty for us to be expansive with our decisions. And we did put a lot of emphasis on trying to modernize the schools and support construction of another school in the future. But you all did receive the report from the CI committee, which was sent to the entire planning commission and everyone else on that list. So I'm sure that is available for other members of the public who'd like to peruse the details, but I think that's the only thing I have. I didn't see anyone else with any committee reports. It's obviously been over the holidays and then Snowmageddon happened. And so not a lot has gone on since we last saw you guys. So with that, the next item on our agenda is to review the Board of Supervisors meeting from December 15th, 2021. And Mr. Rapp, if we can have that review, please.
Sure. There were two public hearings that evening for land use applications. We had the board approved a special use permit for the Education Transformation Center over in Earlingsville that came before this commission. Unanimous approval there. And then the board also approved ZMA for Rio Point, which when it came before this commission, it was Parkway Place. New name, new owner, same project for the most part. And the board approved that. So we'll be seeing some new apartments coming up in the Rio district. That was it.
Those are, if I'm remembering, those are the ones that are up on Rio Road that are not part of the Rio corridor traffic study. So I'm sorry. Is that the Parkway Place ones?
They're right at the corner of John Warner Parkway and Rio Road where it transitions.
Yeah.
So right adjacent to the roundabout that's in going there.
Got it.
Yep. So it's included in the study. So our consultant worked with them with their plans, and they'll continue to work with Vdot as that project moves forward. And they have incorporated some like the multi-use paths and things along the frontage that we plan to send on down Rio Road.
Thanks.
Sure.
Couldn't remember if that was the one that was just out of it or was in it.
There is another one that's currently under review right now. It's on the other side of 29.
Right.
So,
Okay, thank you. Do we have any old business any commissioner wants to bring up?
Just Chair, in that area, this is for, we did that we approved the project. I think we approved the project that's on the street that Daniel lives on, Belvedere. Is it Belvedere in the corner of Belvedere and Rio? Is that moving forward? Is that ever going to move forward?
It's not moving forward as of now. We don't have anything under review, but I'm familiar with the project that was approved. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any new business? Any items for follow-up? Okay, and I think we have come to the sweet end of our meeting. And so I would move that we adjourn the meeting of the Planning Commission until, sorry, once again, cannot see, until Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. Is there a second? I don't know if we have to vote for this. I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Ex-Chair? Yes.
That's a second.
Okay, thank you. I can okay, whatever.
That's a second.
Okay, thank you. The evening is getting late for me. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I don't think we have to vote. We're just going to adjourn to that time. So with that, I wish you all a good evening and look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for your vote of confidence in myself and Mr. Claiborne. I'm hoping we shall not disappoint, but if we do, our door is always open, and feel free to contact us at any time, anything that you want to bring up relating to the commission or other planning activities. So with that, thank you guys and have a great evening. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.